It is Monday, July 28th, 2025. And what I wanted to talk about today is the concept of progress and how you measure it and how it appears different to everyone. And spoiler alert, I don't really have a good answer for this. It's kind of like trying to define intelligence and what makes somebody more intelligent. It's like a very abstract concept. But a lot of people have a lot of things to say about, progress and how they define their own progress and societal progress and all that stuff. And we all experience this life subjectively. That's kind of like one of the axioms of living as a human being on Earth, that we all have our own impenetrable point of view from which we experience our life. But there is an objective progress. And our minds are so small, and how we only experience life through our own eyes, through our own minds, with our own bodies, from one point of perspective, with our feet on the ground, wherever we are. And there are things that give us wider perspective, like traveling and education and our own imagination and our ability to dream. That gives us a greater perspective. And it seems like we are these spiritual beings with some kind of link to something far bigger than just what we see and hear and what we can measure. But it's important to pick goals and choose to progress towards them, to kind of challenge ourselves, to better ourselves, at least in my opinion. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would argue the greatest purpose and joy in life is to just maximize your relaxed state and just be a couch potato and a lump. And hey, maybe that's great for 20, 30 years as long as you can sustain it. But eventually you start to become very, very uncomfortable. And I've, experienced just being a couch potato for, a decade maybe. And so I'm actually going to talk about probably from the age of 6 to 16, I was completely addicted to video games. And you can measure progress in a lot of ways. One thing I want to talk about is your starting point. People cheer and applause for morbidly obese people that lose 300 pounds and they're still 200 pounds. And I don't think I've ever quite hit 200 pounds. And people cheer for meth addicts that were meth addicts for 10 years, and the guy who's just never tried meth or tried it and never got addicted to it, they don't have any cheer or applause for them. And in the Bible, it talks a lot about the prodigal son, and it's an even greater joy for the ones who stumble and then stand back up. And I entirely believe that, because it's true for all of us. None of us never stumble. And well, I guess the guy who never stumbled was Jesus Christ himself. But nobody alive knows anybody like that. That's been so many generations since Jesus was alive that nobody today really knows anyone that never stumbles who's totally perfect. So let's talk about progress. And what does progress mean? What are we, almost 5 minutes into this already? Yeah, progress. This one might be really rambly, and I don't really expect it to have a real definitive point. This is probably something that I could talk about for hours and hours and hours and still not really come to any conclusion or end definitive idea on what progress is and what it means. And I should also say it's your personal progress that should matter to you the most and how you define it. And granted, you could make that a very evil thing, and you could say because the world is evil, I'm just going to hurt as many people as possible, and every person I hurt is more progress. But that's obviously objectively not true. for society. Like from your subjective viewpoint, which I would consider like you don't get to that point without some serious drama or something very bad happening along the way, like a serious misconduct of a lot of people for a long time that leads to a person thinking that way. But for the normal people who aren't psychopaths, progress to you, like a fractal of it, like there's your life's work and all the metrics that you gauge yourself by, like your patience, your kindness, your work ethic, your efficiency. These are all things that you work towards and then you kind of peak at in your middle age. And then as you get older, they all start to fall backwards again until you're kind of like a baby again. And then you croak. And that's kind of, it's like a bell curve, It's like, as a baby, your parents are so concerned with your milestones, or they should be if they care about you. Like when you're holding your head up, and then when you do tummy time, can you roll over and then roll back over? When are you walking? When are you talking? Do you know your like letters and numbers and shapes and colors and all that stuff? And that's where we all kind of start out. And, I've seen a lot of kids at this point, probably not as much as anyone who had a big family back in the day, but enough to see patterns and to notice like where other kids excel and, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And this conversation is more for the people, like I'm talking to my future children and the people who feel behind in life, even though they feel like they maybe are like 20, 30 years old, because I felt very stunted as a teenager and as a young adult because I did not have a lot of like social interactions. I played video games every day for like 10 years. And so it was like a huge moment of progress for me when I turned 16 to be like, I'm not playing video games anymore. Just like cold turkey, I just stopped. And I started putting all that time into playing the guitar. And now guitar is a very valuable thing for me because no matter what my job is, no matter how things are going in my marriage or with my kids or anything, like I have so many years into it that I can just be like, you know what? Everything is stressing me out right now. A lot of other things, I'm not in a peak of things going well. I'm in a trough of things being kind of chaotic, the cycle of chaos and order. And if you want to grow in life, you're going to have those chaotic moments. But because I've put so much time into playing the guitar, I can like kind of go into that and be like, okay, yeah, I can just pick up where I left off. Where is my progress at? And I can work towards that. And it's like a visible thing that I can see myself growing in, that I can measure my progress on, but it's just in that like tiny little window. And, at a job interview, I definitely can't bust out the guitar and be like, well, check this out. I've been doing this now for like 5 years. But as you're doing, like, a lot of people in America right now, my age, they're like, oh, I'm not where I should be in my career, because they're measuring it based off of the perspective of like the baby boomer era, where everyone could just give eye contact and a firm handshake and get a job. Granted, a lot of people my age and younger cannot give eye contact and a firm handshake. So there is, like, these stereotypes don't just exist for nothing. Like I see both sides, is my point. There's people out there that don't have jobs, that deserve jobs. There's underqualified people for overqualified positions due to nepotism, and my experience is definitely, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But anyone can really just go get a job working in a factory in America as like an operator position, like, semi-skilled. I don't call anything unskilled because nobody can really just show up anywhere and start cranking it out with no training whatsoever. But progress. You want to be making progress. I've seen, like, you want a calendar, you want to, like I said, you want things to look forward to. You don't just need a concert or, something to do every weekend like that. Those are great things to have, don't get me wrong, as something to look forward to, but you also want to look forward to your own capabilities improving. Like, I'm looking forward to hopefully learning this job really well, and God willing, I'm looking forward to, getting better at the guitar just for my own enjoyability, like just for my own journey with it, let alone like ever playing for anybody or like sharing my music. I'm looking forward to becoming better at gardening. Every year I see like a new opportunity to try things and see like how much time can I put into preparing the soil and just laying everything out beautifully and timing everything so that it blooms all in sequence, and just carrying baskets and baskets of tomatoes inside. I'm looking forward to learning how to build. I would love to build my own house one day, God willing. I'm looking forward to all of these things that I deem as progress. And something important that I want to say to my future children and all of the people who feel like they're not making progress for whatever reason, but are really trying and genuinely like trying to find out what that is and what that means to them, and trying to then apply themselves in that and see the results of their own progress. Sometimes it doesn't come in a way that's easy to see. The obvious example is always like athleticism. Like if you lift weights and you start gaining muscles, that's evidence. That's evidence of your progress, and it's like something no one can take away from you. But like playing the guitar, no one can see that I can do that. I used to have long hair. Like pretty recently, I shaved my head a little while ago, and so people would be like, "Oh, you probably play the guitar," and I'd be like, "Yep, sure do." But no one. Like, I go to a job interview and they're like, "Well, do you know how these machines work?" And it's like, "No, I can play the guitar. Yeah, that's what I spent my time on." And they might see that as like foolish. Like, "Well, that's not what we're looking for here." And it's like, "Yeah, no, I understand. I'm trying to do both in my life. I'm trying to divide my time and take away from this because I believe I'm so special that I can do both." And that's like unironically true, that I believe that, and I think that it's worth it, and I love it, and it's just worth it for the love of it. And even in the age of 2025, where there's like a million AI bands that people don't care at all about the human element, they're just feeding that machine and asking AI to play it exactly what they want to hear, and then not being satisfied. And I was thinking the other day, I was listening to another podcast where someone was saying, back in the day, we used to get an album, and because it was so rare, because there wasn't just such an oversaturation and overabundance of available good music for us to listen to, we would even listen to the songs that we didn't like over and over again and try to like really hear them until we understood them, and we would put it on us and be like, "Oh, well, this is my favorite artist. Like, I have a kind of relationship in my heart with these people that I've never met. Like, there's almost like a back and forth and a conversation happening with this album. And so I'm gonna like even listen to the songs that I don't particularly like, and then they might become my favorite ones later on. And I'll talk to someone and be like, "Oh yeah, but have you really listened to track 5?" And I like to this day I still do that with albums, where I'm like, "Oh, I don't really care for this one," and then I listen to it a couple times and I'm like, "This is actually the best one." But yeah, progress. We have this system in the modern world in America that's like very recent. It's not really like even been, if anything, it's been proven kind of a disaster. Of you like go to preschool, then you go to kindergarten, then you go to elementary school, then you go to middle school, then you go to high school, and by then you're 18 years old, you're an adult. And by puberty, you should be like learning what your mother and father do for work, and being able to kind of do those same tasks at a childlike level. And then by 18, you should have like a really good understanding of like driving and whatever jobs your parents do. They should be like including you, not to a stressful level, but just preparing you and like giving you some kind of test to show that you're capable. And they should, like, your parents are the first ones in charge of your progress. They're trying to give you, in theory, as many advantages as possible. So, yeah, like I was saying, it's all messed up and backwards. Like, you're in school this whole time learning these subjects that everyone is supposed to learn for whatever reason. Oh man, my storage is about to kick me off this video again. I don't know. Like, this is probably going to be part 1 of a bunch of videos. Like, we can talk about progress forever and ever. But yeah, like my daughter, she didn't really walk until she was over a year old, and now she's like